Last but by no means least, our final speaker is Maresa Sheehan. And Maresa works with the Irish Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine in the regional laboratory in County Kilkenny. And she's going to talk about farmers' knowledge of the risk of spread of infection from animals to humans and their transmission prevention practices carried out in 2015.
Hello everyone, thank you very much. I know this is a bit of the graveyard shift, so I hope not to keep you too long and keep you somewhat interested anyway. As part of my work as a vet in the Regional Veterinary Laboratory in Kilkenny, I'm also a member of the South East Regional Zoonoses Committee, and we thought it might be interesting to carry out a questionnaire on farmers who are submitting material to the Regional Veterinary Laboratories in Ireland and the Central Veterinary Laboratory in Dublin. We felt they'd be a very interesting cohort because they were actually dealing with disease on their farm, and so we thought we were talking a lot about zoonosis prevention and everything, but I suppose we thought it would be useful to get a baseline as to the knowledge of what farmers knew, their different disease prevention methods, and actually it could inform further work for zoonosis committees and other agencies. Just for people who aren't from Ireland, just to give a background of farming in Ireland from the Census of Agriculture in 2010, 64% of the land area is used for agriculture, and 80% of that is devoted to grass. The average farm size is 32.7 hectares, and there's over 139,000 farmers, and 87.6% of those are males, so good news for the females. And the average age of the farmer in Ireland is 54 years, not so good news. So just to give a brief breakdown on the farming types, the vast majority of farms, I suppose, in Ireland are involved in cattle production, and this involves both beef and milk production, and that accounts for 58% of the agricultural output in Ireland. So what is the South East Regional Zoonosis Committee? It's a multi-agency group, human and animal health professionals, and its remit is to raise awareness of common zoonosis among the farmers in the region. So what was the aim of the survey? It was basically to ascertain farmers' knowledge of the risk of spread of infection from animals to humans and their transmission prevention practices. The objectives to determine farmers' knowledge of zoonosis and the risk of infection posed to humans by some common animal exposures, and whether and how often farmers carried out simple infection prevention activities on the farm, and where farmers get information on animal diseases. So basically, were we giving the right information? Was the right information getting across? And was the recommendations, were they actually being used on a practical basis on farm? So it was a survey of farmers who submitted material to the 6 regional veterinary laboratories, and you see their locations there marked in the red spots. So that's where I am there, but these are the others here. So there's a good coverage of the country. And we included 1,044 respondents. It was a self-administered pen and paper questionnaire. So just to give you a background of the demographics of the people who completed the questionnaire, 92% male, 8% female, age range 12 to 91. I don't know how the 12-year-old got in past us, but I don't know how he reached the biro. Average age 46 years. The oldest was 91. Obviously, he never drank unpasteurised milk and always wore gloves. So the farming types, again, as the census basically outlines, dairy and suckler, beef were very well represented. A lot of farmers in Ireland are involved in more than one enterprise, so there'd be certainly a mixture of dairy and beef would be quite common, and then some would also keep sheep. So we do have a good spread, and they'd be the species that we would carry out postmortems most frequently on in the regional labs also, which would determine the type of farmer that would be coming through. So some results. Very good knowledge that 88% of farmers were aware that it was unsafe for pregnant women to be in the vicinity of animals giving birth. So that message was getting through. And 78% identified aborting animals as a source of infection. But older farmers were more aware than younger farmers, dairy farmers more likely than suckler farmers to know that aborting animals were a source of infection. 40 to 50% identified scouring or diarrheic young animals, sick poultry and pets as a source of infection. But I suppose to turn that on its head then, over 50% didn't realise that these groups of animals were a source of infection, and that's quite a high percentage. Younger farmers were more likely to identify sick poultry and pets as a source of infection. Only 10% identified healthy animals as a source of infection. So I think that's quite interesting, especially after the last presentation. So, you know, there's a lack of awareness that even though the animal isn't clinically ill, that it can still be a source of the likes of VTEC or Campylobacter infections, which wouldn't be clinically significant in our animals. So 86 to 96% reported always washing their hands at the opportunities during the day about which they were queried. I'd say I wash mine too if I was asked. But anyway, taking it at face value, a lot of people were washing their hands when it would have been recommended to do so. But again, older farmers were twice as likely as younger farmers to wash their hands. So I don't know why that may be. Maybe younger farmers are wearing more gloves and think that provided protection. But I suppose a key message in all this is that gloves are only another add-on, but you can't get away from the fact that a good hand washing technique is the best thing that you can do to prevent a lot of infection. So the use of gloves, dairy farmers more likely than suckler farmers to wear gloves when working. Again, I think that's probably a function of the dairy industry in Ireland and the work of the likes of Animal Health Ireland and on cell check programmes and that, where it's really pushed that, you know, clean gloves have to be worn while you're milking and things like that. So I think that message is borne out here, and that probably access to gloves is a big thing on dairy farmers, because all dairy farms now have boxes of gloves around the place. A very interesting one here, the consumption of unpasteurised milk. 20% of all farmers, but 40% of dairy farmers reported drinking unpasteurised milk at least once a week. Again, nothing startling about this next sentence, in that dairy farmers were 9 times more likely than suckler farmers to drink unpasteurised milk. You'd be a brave suckler farmer that would try and milk his cows. And again, what's interesting is no difference between younger and older farmers. And again, I presume vets working in the field would say that I suppose it's a family thing as opposed to an age thing. Either the family is drinking unpasteurised milk or they're not. But quite a startling statistic really, I suppose, that up to 40% are still consuming unpasteurised milk. Then what is the drinking water source at home? 72% of farmers reported using a private water source at home. 59% had a private well. 13% were involved in a private group water scheme. And only 37% get their water tested annually. Again, dairy farmers were more likely than suckler farmers to test their water annually. Again, perhaps that is due to a lot of quality assurance schemes that are running in Ireland, where as part of it you're required to have your water tested for dairy certification and insurance schemes. Perhaps that's just an opinion. So again, that's interesting. Then I suppose what was interesting from the Zoonoses committee point of view and from an educational point of view is, are we using the right jargon? Are we using the right terminology to get this information across? So only 33% of the people surveyed identified what actually the word zoonosis, that it was a disease that a person gets from an animal. So again, it's just a very interesting thing to know that, you know, maybe we need to just relook at our use of terminology. Dairy farmers, again, more likely than suckler farmers. Younger farmers, more likely than older farmers. I hope there's no suckler farmers here. They're getting an awfully bad press. And 7.8% thought it was a disease of zoo animals. So just... And then, just for any of the vets in the room, and apologies to the others, the sources of information on animal diseases, where were they sourced? The vast majority through their veterinary practitioners. So again, it just highlights the multi-faceted role that veterinary practitioners should be playing. And as Dr. Wall said, thinking outside the box, we do have a role to play in education, and especially when we're going out treating sick animals. And like Pádraig said there, when there is disease on the farm, it is a risk. And, I suppose we have a role and a responsibility in that as well, just to educate, because we are a big source of information. So in summary, high levels of awareness that pregnant women should not help birthing animals and that aborting animals are a source of infection, but there certainly isn't the same level of awareness that other animals are also possible sources of infection. Younger farmers are more likely to identify the sources of infection, but less likely to do anything about it. So the older farmers are more likely to wash their hands and before eating and drinking on the farm. 60% of farmers have a private well water supply to their homes, and 1/3 of farmers with a private water supply get their water tested annually. And 40% of dairy farmers drink unpasteurised milk at least once a week. And only 30% of farmers knew what a zoonosis is. So conclusion, farmers' knowledge and awareness of the spread of infection from animals is a concern. The survey has identified the need for further education to increase awareness of potential biohazards on farms, practical measures that can be taken, and the increased awareness of the practical measures that can be taken to mitigate risk of zoonotic infections. I'd like to acknowledge and thank, I'm only the mouthpiece, all the people involved in doing this, and also particularly my colleagues in the South East Zoonosis Committee, and also my colleagues in Sligo, Athlone, Dublin, Limerick and Cork, and obviously Kilkenny Regional Veterinary Laboratories. Thank you very much.
Maresa, thank you very much, Maresa. Lots of thought there for public health professionals and vets in terms of communicating risk to farmers, and some startling or scary statistics thrown up by your survey. Any questions for Maresa? I suppose I have one question in terms of have we failed in terms of thus far in terms of getting messages through to farming communities, and how best to actually get the message to them? Yeah,
I think probably what prompted this survey was that at the time there was a lot of emphasis on farm safety, actually, physical farm safety on the farm at the time as regards injuries and machinery and from actual physical with animals. And we thought probably what is more insidious, but probably a more prevalent risk, is actually the risk of zoonosis. And that's what prompted this. And I think the results of this would definitely mean that we need to maybe, obviously the other is exceptionally important, but also maybe to refocus, or without scaremongering or doing anything of the sort, but giving good practical advice, again, to try and prevent what you were speaking about, and even, crypto and Campylobacter and all that, those simple things, the simple things can really help to try and mitigate the risk.
I had a question. In the U.S., brucellosis has been pretty well eradicated. So there's not nearly this awareness of pregnant women to stay away from birthing animals. What other zoonoses are involved in that, or that you give that warning for?
Yeah, I suppose of particular concern in Ireland is around lambing, so toxoplasmosis and chlamydophila abortus would be a very serious risk. We also have obviously abortion due to salmonella and leptospirosis, which are also zoonotics. So they'd be the top ones. Listeria monocytogenes obviously is a cause of abortion also. Thankfully, we're also officially free now from Brucella abortus, so likewise there is maybe that risk, but there does seem to be a good awareness, and especially with sheep lambing in particular, there's a very, very good awareness that really pregnant women don't even go near the lambing shed because of the risk, particularly from chlamydophila abortus, because it can be actually spread from the aborted material. Toxoplasma obviously has the intermediate host and isn't as much of a risk.
Would you consider, Dermot Sparrow, pig vet from Ireland, would you consider Clostridium difficile as a potential zoonosis? There was a paper presented by one of the pathologists from back west, and they did a survey on pig farms in Ireland, and every single pig farm turned up with Clostridium difficile. I have difficulty in understanding why they decided to go out and turn over the stones, because once you start doing that, you find that if you go looking, you will find all sorts of bugs everywhere. Does Clostridium difficile represent a difficulty for the pig industry, and do you regard it as a zoonosis?
Yeah, I'm the wrong person to ask about the medical point of view of it. I might ask Dr. Wall maybe to take that, because I'm a vet, so we're particularly interested in the human pathogens. But I do know, I think it's my colleague, Dr. Maura McElroy, who you're referring to about the Clostridial difficile. And I know there is some maybe further studies maybe being done on other species on the presence of Clostridial difficile. But I think with all these things, I know the dangers. If you look, you have to be prepared for what you'll find. I suppose my opinion might be slightly different in that you're always better to know what's out there and then address it and mitigate the risks and to do a risk assessment and whatever. But as to the actual medical relevance of Clostridium difficile, I'm not the person to answer that. Sorry.
Any other questions? Yep.
Just one comment there, Maresa, on the hand washing. I doubt if you were told the truth.
How could you say such a thing? Absolutely, and I think washing hands and washing them properly is also two different things. But I suppose if nothing else, even asking the question might put it into people's minds. But it won't be the hands that'll kill him. There's two messages there.
Okay, thank you, Maresa. Okay, folks, I'd like to close the session. Before I do, can I just sincerely thank our speakers for their excellent talks. Thank you.